That's Northern Lights crossed with Hawaiian.
5X
By the BC Seed Company there.
The 5X.
Marc, hold that up. Hold that up, Marc. That is awesome.
164 million people smoke marijuana, and only people in Ontario live in a jurisdiction where marijuana is legal. The important thing is, when Parliament comes back, this will become a wave. There's already smoke easies open in Ontario, London. I was just in London, a place called the Hippie Cafe, a beautiful place at Barker Street in Oxford.
We need one here.
It has over 50 seats outside for people, and last night the place was full for several hours. And not because I was there, just it's always full, he says. There's always 50 people. And heck, it's right beside a residential neighborhood in the main street. People are having a great old time, not an argument amongst them. You know, I've never even had a marijuana party, and I've had thousands of them that had, well, not thousands, I've had several dozen, maybe even 100 parties where a lot of pot was around, and I have never even seen a loud argument at any of them, ever. I have never seen a fight. Now, I tell you, a bar must see one fight every night. I can't imagine there's a bartender alive that in 24 hours can't say he heard an argument, a spat, some guy and a girl going at it, or an out-and-out duke-em-out fist fight. I have never had it at any single party I've ever thrown. And you know what I think? That Sarstock, where they got the Rolling Stones to play in North Toronto and Downsview, 500,000 people are there drinking beer into the hot sun. I'm thinking, I know why there were no fights there, because 50,000 people brought joints. And kept that crowd calm. And none of that, you can always, you never see people passing their beer around. Who'd be that? We stayed away from me. I'm not drinking that, right? But you know what? You pass a joint around, you get 50 people in a row to smoke that joint, right? Marijuana brings people together. It's an herb of unity. It's an herb of fellowship, of conviviality. Unlike all other things, most prescription drugs, other substances, alcohols, they're not meant to be shared. You might drink your beer in the presence of someone, but marijuana is meant to be a sacrament passed around and shared amongst ourselves. What it says is that we're all equal here. We're all recognized as fellow members of the cannabis culture here. So that people who are wearing good suits, who've got dreadlocks, who are different colors, who are young people. I've seen people, hell, there were people on the London Police Department steps listening to me who were 12, reading cannabis culture while I was going on. 12-year-olds, 65-year-olds, guys with beards, guys with dread, people of all kinds come under this banner of the cannabis plant. And it's a great plant, and you know, I've always thought, you know, there's so many good things about cannabis. It is the most peculiar mystery on earth why it's banned. It isn't really. The reason marijuana is banned is because people who smoke marijuana are critical thinkers that don't accept dogma, that don't accept authority, that are critical of the establishment, and that are looking for alternate ways of coming to any kind of answer. That's why we smoke marijuana. People sometimes ask me, well, Mark, I don't smoke marijuana. Well, what's the big deal? What's it like? And I said, well, you got your five senses, your taste, smell, sight, your hearing, and your touch. But when you smoke marijuana, it gives all your five senses a sixth sense, that things taste differently. They smell differently. And you certainly know by watching much music when you're stoned, they look differently when you're stoned, right? All of a sudden you're going, you said, oh, is this profound and I'm just missing it, right? And the most important sense of all, and then things feel differently. Sex is different. Eating is different. Hearing is especially different. When you smoke marijuana, the way you hear music is so profoundly changed that marijuana is responsible for three completely indigenous forms, and I say indigenous to the cannabis culture, forms of music. The blues and the jazz and rock and roll all emanate from the use of marijuana. Jazz and blues are very specific. The jazz and blues of the modern era started around 1915 when black people who were working in New Orleans, who were working in Texas, who were longshoremen, would get marijuana that was just beginning to arrive in Mexico. They smoked it, and they realized right away that the way they heard music and interpreted their Negro spirituals and their field songs became much more changed. Marijuana has a great deal of influence on the way the beat and the rhythm of music is affected.
Doesn't
and
quality
so,
affect the quality of marijuana affect that?
well, the marijuana in 1915 was excellent because it was totally untampered and unregulated by the government, so people just harvest it and ship it.
Now it's hard to determine what's good and what's not, though.
Well, that's the great thing about legalization. In a legal environment, we could regulate, like Agriculture Canada say, okay, you can't spray Avid on those plants, man, that's really bad, and we'll test them, and if there's residue of poisons on that plant, you know, you'll be charged for poisoning and not for selling pot. And a guy who sells marijuana would have to say, well, this is organically grown, or I can assure you this has no sprays on it. We know that for a fact. And now that the city can license people on that basis, not on a punishment basis. You can sell it and you can, but simply if you sell any kind of thing that's meant to be put in someone's body, and that's true with fruit and vegetables, you can't spray poisons on that. Well, people shouldn't be allowed to spray poisons on our plant. And the thing is, the irony is, the reason people do spray things on our plant is because organized crime gets involved with something that the government has literally given to them. In other words, hey, it's not marijuana that's the problem, it's prohibition. Prohibition makes it makes it so lucrative, makes marijuana production so lucrative that people who don't love and care about the plant. The great thing about, I have respect for the people who are legitimate growers and grow marijuana, but you know what? It's not about the money. It's about freedom. And we should all be growing marijuana in our backyard. We should be growing marijuana in our basement. We should be growing it everywhere so that basically we almost demonetize it amongst ourselves so that we're trading it. So you're growing 5 or 10 strains, I'm growing 5 or 10 strains, and so we get a bit of everybody so that we all have a little stash, maybe of half an ounce of 40 or 50 different strains that we've grown over the summer or in greenhouses. That's the way the world should be. So that when we meet, it's no longer about money, it's about just the pure association of the cannabis that we're sharing. Now, I'm not saying that there won't be coffee shops. People have got to sell this. People will make a living. But I'm telling you, there's 20 to 25 million Americans who want our pot so bad. And if we had coffee shops dotting all along the border, Toronto, Hamilton, Niagara Falls, and there's apparently one that just opened in St. Catharines, and there's one in London, and all those Americans, they're the ones that can spend all the money. And not only that, it's totally subversive, because when an American comes up here and goes to the hippie cafe or goes to the hot box cafe, they're going to go back to the United States and they're going to say, boy, Canada's a cool place. Why can't we be like that? Why do we have to have such an armed-to-the-teeth, paranoid Bush administration-run country? By the way, I would just like to say for the record that I believe Canada is superior to the United States standard of living in every single way. Our health, we're healthier, our schools are better, our streets are safer, we're not a gun culture, our pot's better, our people are friendlier, our cities are cleaner and safer. And when Americans come up here, they'll say, how can there be a social democracy north of the United States that seems to be better in every single way, has this great pot? They will get so depressed about that thought, they'll go home and they'll vote the Bush administration out. And that's why marijuana is legal now. We have 1 year to influence millions and millions of Americans that marijuana is great. It should be legal. It is legal here in Canada. You should come and try it. And then you should go back to the United States and get rid of the administration that has specifically targeted marijuana people. The Bush administration is probably the most vile, evil administration ever to the cannabis culture to come upon. They are targeting marijuana. They actually say marijuana is the most dangerous drug in the United States because it's all about ideology. Remember, people on alcohol, they could vote Republican. People who take other drugs, they may or may not vote. They don't care. I assure you, 20 to 25 million Americans who smoke marijuana will never, ever vote for the Bush administration. But look how insidious it gets. By getting a felony conviction in the United States for growing pot at home, you can never vote again for the rest of your life. So imagine being convicted, serving years in prison, only to be released and find that you can never participate in the democratic process by which you have been sentenced to years in jail and denied all your rights, been denied your culture, and you can't do anything about it now because you lose your right to vote. Apparently there are 500,000 black people in America with drug convictions that will never vote again, who would never vote for the Bush administration. There are, there's 250,000 people in jail at any given moment, like right now. More people are in jail for marijuana around the world right now than any other time in history. And 150,000 people are in jail in the United States at any one time for marijuana, and another 100,000 people worldwide are in jail. In Malaysia last week, a man was sentenced to death for selling 1 pound of marijuana.
Trucks coming to put out the joint.
In Thailand, 3,500 people have been executed by the police in the last 4 months in a drug cleanup. 50,000 people were arrested while 3,500 people were killed. I get letters all over the world. If anybody gets busted, I tend to be the person to hear about it. So I thought I saw a thumbs up from that drive.
Yeah.
Not a bit. Yeah.
Marc,
Well, what do they do sitting around there in the fire
paying
station?
attention at all to the Senate report?
Well, now that's funny because you're looking at that committee was made up of nobody under 60 on that.
That's right.
No, sorry, Ann Coul's about 58. Nobody under 58 years of age was on the Senate committee. They all unanimously endorsed it. There's not a single dissenting vote. They listened to 2,000 experts over a 2-year period, including myself. In fact, I got to debate the RCMP for 10 minutes and they listened, and then eventually rejected the entire RCMP argument. In fact, the RCMP said, here are our studies showing that marijuana is harmful, and Claude Nolan looked at him and said, no, we know these studies, they're all false, they've all been disproven, and handed them back to the RCMP, and I thought, oh man, if they let me live, this will be a great moment to remember. The Senate